How's it going, everybody? And welcome back to another edition of the Stupid Questions Podcast. Today's episode is a little wacky on my part because we start recording in another part of the house, and the internet, for whatever reason, the extender was not working well, so I had to relocate to this area. But we're going to be talking with Nicole Falcaro. She is a round 2 person on the podcast. We had her back early in the early episodes, I think probably around 20 or something like that. Obviously she's a good friend because she's on RTS, and I've gotten to know that team pretty well. And today she shares pretty deeply about some relationship stuff, about just some thoughts and feelings of growing up and the things that have affected her to craft her into the human being she is today. So just want to introduce you again to Nicole and hope you find a lot of value in it. All right, here's Nicole Falcaro. Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on round 2, the official. I mean, I guess we've had a few people on at different times, but they've been different style of podcasts. Like Nick came on twice with a group and then one-on-one, but you were the first one-on-one repeat. So congratulations. I mean, what else can I say?
I really hope I have enough new things to say since the last time.
Oh, I have lots of questions for you, so you don't have to stress too much about that. But yeah, so tell me about your run this morning. How was that?
Yeah, so I did an hour and 5-minute run, and it was out and back, going out 32 minutes and coming back 28. So It was very much by feel, and I kept doing this. Julie gives me this run a lot. Julie Dibbins. Yeah. And I kept doing it on the rail trail near me, and I realized I was getting so bad at hills, and I'm getting so lazy, and also running on super flat ground. My muscles were getting kind of lazy, and I wasn't like using other muscles. So I actually went and did this on an hour loop instead, which was gorgeous. It's called. I go into Newcastle, New Hampshire, and it's like beautiful causeways, and it's technically an island. Nice. So yeah, just breathtaking, beautiful.
Yeah, it's one of those runs where you don't have to think too much about the run, just more about the surroundings.
Yeah, and just like going more by feel too. Like I didn't look at my watch and at my pace until I was complete. And I was like, oh, okay, I did 6:30 pace for the pickup. Cool.
Nice. Yeah. What does 6:30 pace feel like for you? Like, is that pretty easy? Like, you're going to run faster than that in a 70.3?
It's right around my 70.3 pace right now. Yeah. Like my fastest ever was like 6:25 or so, but right around 70.3. So not sustainable, but also every time I run 70.3 pace in practice, I'm like, how do I do this for 13 miles after a ride? Like it never adds up.
Yeah. No, I think most of us feel that way. Yeah. Not even mattering too much of what the pace is, but it's so interesting how like once we get into taper week and then the race comes around, you're able to kind of run off the bike faster, typically more than you're like, oh man, this should feel a lot harder.
Yeah. I think it's harder. I think it would feel harder to do like an open half marathon than in a 70.3.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So, Julie Dibbins, I have had her on the podcast, obviously, and a number of her athletes now. I don't even know how many in total, but I would love to hear the story how you came into knowing who Julie was and how she began coaching you, because I think you touched on it briefly the first episode, but I would love to know how you heard about her and how'd you get saddled with her?
Yeah, it was actually, I called Leslie Smith, and this is like years before we were RTS teammates. And because I had met her, I think my first time I did Boulder 70.3 in 2018. And the true story behind that is like, I was at like a after party and she was there and I was like, oh my God, she's so cool. Like she goes out and like hangs out with everybody after a race. And it was at like I guess like a dance club, like a nightclub.
Okay.
And, but like fast forward to only a year later, but 2019, I'm looking for a new coach. And I was like, I don't even know how to know. There's not a directory of pro triathlon coaches. Yeah. How do I even know what my options are? So I was like, I would look at Instagram and I'd be looking at pro triathletes and saying who their coach was. And podcasts weren't actually a big thing in 2019 quite yet. So that wasn't an avenue for me. And I called Leslie and I was like, hey, tell me I don't know, 10 coaches and give me your brief one-liner on all of them.
Oh, wow.
And yeah. And so I did that with her, and I did that with my friend Nick Grenay, who works with Varlo, used to work with Magic 5.
Okay.
So I think you know who he is. And
Yeah.
he did the same thing because he was a pro triathlete as well. And then I looked at all of those coaches' websites. I ended up setting up a call with 3 of them, and then I chose Julie.
Okay. Why did you choose Julie?
I really wanted a female coach, someone who would understand women's physiology a little bit better, and like someone who I wasn't afraid to like talk about my period with or tell her like these are the symptoms I'm having this week. And I wanted someone who had experience with pro triathletes, of course. And I loved that she did a couple of, like she did one training camp at the time per year. This past year we had just like a weekend camp, but it was, I knew I would have enough. If I wanted to, I could have some FaceTime with her out in Boulder. And she seemed like somebody who was going to be extremely responsive and tell me the why behind what I was doing.
Like each individual workout?
Yeah. Rather than just feel like at the time I felt like I was just checking boxes or getting my workouts like a day before the workout. So
yeah. So does Julie usually plan in like rotations of 1 week or a month, or how does it look for you?
Yeah, it's about a week at a time. So for like, I think on Friday, usually she unhides the following week and assigns it. Not that she assigns it that far in advance, but I get like a week at a time revealed on Friday.
Oh, interesting. I didn't even know you could unhide stuff. Is that in Training Peaks? Mm-hmm. Oh my goodness. I'm so bad. Yeah.
As a coach, you can you unhide your athletes' workouts. But if you also are a coach on Training Peaks, you can unhide your own workouts.
That's so funny.
Yeah. But Lisa Vaqueras told me that trick.
Oh, that's so funny. That's hilarious. That's awesome. Yeah, it's interesting. The different coaching philosophies. I've been coached by 2 people now, and there's definite like positives and negatives I think about every single person. But it's always interesting to hear how people approach the philosophy side of it, because everybody can assign workouts. I mean, you can even use AI now, I think, to probably build like a decent training plan, but it's that one-on-one face-to-face time I think is huge, but communicating on the daily. So how often do you communicate with Julie?
On Training Peaks every day. Yeah. On the phone probably once every 3 months. But it's usually, like always before a race and then usually after a race. And another thing about Julie is that she was scientific enough, but also, I don't know the right word, but she knows the importance of the mental side of things, and like being in a state where you're a happy athlete is a fast athlete. It's almost overused, but like enough like scientific versus enough like woo-woo. So.
All right, we're back. So you were telling me we were talking workouts with Julie. Face-to-face time's important. You can unhide your workouts if you're a coach in Training Peaks. I didn't know that. That's really crazy because I've been coaching now for 3 years. And yeah, Training Peaks has changed a lot. But you said you do not coach, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a strong feeling that if I coached, I would get too self-blamey for if my athletes didn't do well.
Yeah.
Because I obviously considered it because I have very strong conviction about this.
Yeah.
And I think I would get too focused on them. And I don't know. Maybe if I wasn't racing anymore, it'd be different, but
yeah.
I'm very quick to be like to feel guilty about things and have self-blame. And I blame that on being raised Catholic. Really?
Tell me more about that. That sounds like a good topic.
Yeah, they say I wasn't like that. We were never that like religious of a family, but
sure.
It is like a common thing to like feel extreme guilt and shame when making a mistake or doing something wrong as a Catholic. So
yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I actually was thinking about this just yesterday. I was talking with an athlete who he was just telling me how bad he was feeling, and he's been having a ton of just like life stress recently because he's in flight school in the military, and he was doing all of that stuff. And I don't know. I guess he didn't really realize how much inconsistency he has had because he's just not been able to. It's just stuff comes up or he has to ship out here to do this or do that. But he came to me and he's writing me this long list of stuff, and I immediately went to, oh, this is my problem. Oh, what have I done? You know, and I'm thinking it's so interesting how we do that though, because I've noticed that even in my marriage, I've done that at times where I'll get overly focused on me, which actually I think is a bad thing because then it takes away from a lot of times my wife's like, actually, no, that's not the case. And then my athlete was like the same way, like, no, I think it's me, but I think he just needed a place to kind of come and to vent some of that stuff. So yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, I I go like two ways on this because for one thing, I think it's important to be self-aware, right? But
Hmm.
and it's almost I've been thinking about this a lot about being selfish and how selfish this sport is because it's just so time consuming.
Yeah.
But that and it was on a Matthew McConaughey podcast where he said being selfish is the least selfish thing you can do. Because
Interesting.
if you're selfless, then you're actually relying on other people to take care of you.
Hmm.
Whereas if you're selfish, like you are responsible for you. Right? Isn't that like kind of like the total opposite of the what you think about when you think of selfishness?
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my
It's
head around it. It reminds me of this book actually that I read a while back. Have you heard of Timothy Keller?
no.
He's a I think I don't even know what religion he's. He's some kind of evangelical guy, but he has this idea that um, in this short little book, and it's been a couple of years, so forgive me if I kind of butcher this, but the concept is that the most selfish thing you can do, like basically, he makes the argument that depression is the greatest form of selfishness. I think because it's not like because when I think of selfishness in an everyday context, it's like I'm not sharing my toy or I'm not giving you some of my time or I'm not, it's usually like a reciprocating back and forth thing. But he was making the argument that the greatest form of selfishness is depression because when you go into that, it's everything kind of revolves around you. And even though you're like putting a lot of self-harm, how am I going to explain this? I think hopefully that's making sense. But like when you focus on
Mhm.
yourself, and even if you're being not nice to yourself and like, oh, I'm not going out to just grab all these things, but you're kind of beating yourself up inside, like that can be the greatest form of selfishness, which in turn ends up making you obviously not have a great life and arguably not a great human and, all of your relationships kind of fall apart. But yeah, it's interesting the different ways you can look at selfishness for sure.
Yeah. Sounds like your that definition is indulging in every single negative feeling and
Yeah.
brooding on it.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a hard time sleeping last night. I'm curious if you've ever had one of these nights. Do you ever have nights where you just can't sleep?
Very rarely, but I had one on Saturday.
Oh,
But
really?
I'm a really good sleeper. It's like my superpower.
Really? That's,
Yeah.
that's super awesome.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
where is this going?
Yeah. Yeah. So I was laying down and I was sleeping last night or trying to sleep and I was just thinking about all kinds of things, but it's interesting. As I was laying there, I was trying to kind of think through a lot of big life decisions, and yeah, I couldn't quite make out what the issue was, but actually, I totally forgot where this conversation was going. Oh, Nicole, I'm so sorry. Um,
That's okay.
yeah,
When I find in the rare occasion where I do find myself just thinking about every thought, my fallback is I'm not going to solve any of this right now. And the best way to solve these is to get a good night's sleep and reconnect with it in the morning.
mm,
And then right from there, I have this trick where um, if like I'll like go from toe to head and maybe sometimes back to toe where I think about every single muscle and body part and I
mm,
say, is that relaxed? Are you holding any tension there? Yes?
mm,
Okay, let it go. I like literally start at your big toe go to your ankle, then your heel even, and just literally like work all the way up. And almost always, like by the time you get to your head, it's like you're probably fall asleep.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I'm so glad you said that, because that reminded me of where I was going with it. I was trying to think about just the whole idea of being like present, or mindfulness training, kind of centered around that. But I was trying to focus on my breath. And I realized for me, especially when I get in those like sleep deprived states, it is so hard to stay focused on one particular thing, like your breath, or to count to whatever, 100 or something. It's just, but this whole idea of, because one thing I think that's popularly said among this kind of mindfulness training is, if a thought comes into your head, don't like get upset about it. Don't try to like immediately shove it away. Just like accept it as what it is, but kind of like close the chapter of that thought. And that is like one of the most hard things to do. And I was thinking, I think that's why I have such a hard time having consistent races even. Because the ability to kind of stay present, because Mark Allen talked to me a lot about that, being able to just be quiet rather than think about what you're trying to do or have to do, but be totally present in that moment, feel what you're feeling. Obviously, usually it's pain, and then just kind of, graduate through that and be kind to yourself in a way that you can, I guess, go harder, go faster.
Yeah. I had like 8 thoughts while you said that. But I was trying to be present and listen to what you're saying versus thinking about what I'm going to say. But I was recently reading The Subtle Art About Not Giving a Fuck. And it talks so much about, I guess it's kind of opposite, because you're talking about like not thinking about the pain too much, but how pain is what tells you that something is worth doing. And that in life, you shouldn't just follow your, like, what's it, like, not what are you going to give up to get what you want, but what kind of pain are you willing to tolerate to get what you want?
Yeah.
And I think so many of my races are like that, where I am thinking about, okay, this pain I'm going through right now is like, I've never experienced this before, because I'm about to do something I've never done.
Yeah.
If I'm in like doing a really good race, and that's so much of, aside from, I don't brood on the pain all that much. I think my head goes to practicality, and I think, okay, am I drinking enough, and am I eating enough? And is this pace or power or pace sustainable? But I don't have too many, like, I don't spend too much time thinking about anything during a race.
Yeah.
I think that's consistent with Mark Allen, just like
be there.
Quiet.
Yeah. Yeah, it was just so hard to do. But it's interesting you said that about the tolerance or pain tolerance type of a thing. Because if with anything in life, whether it's literally lifting weights or working on a bike, or let's just say the tolerance for going through stress, emotional stress, or the death of a loved one or something like that, when you go through that, it's like literally the hardest thing you've ever experienced, until something else comes along that's harder. But it gives you it's like a stepping stone that allows you to climb that ladder one more time and deal with the fear of height to a new level each time, which is such a hard way to live. Because for me, so I come from a pretty religious, like, Christian background, and we're taught to believe that whenever the second coming of Christ comes, you get to this place where everything will be perfect. And I try to imagine what it would be like to live in a life where everything is perfect, where I don't have any aches or pains, or there's no trial set before me, because there is in our state that we're currently find ourselves in, whether you're religious or not, we find a satisfaction or fulfillment in going to do something hard and making it through. Some people don't do it. Some people actually wallow, and like, it's a horrible way to live, and it's sad, and there's a lot of things that could be said about that. They're the fault of that person's own or not. But I have a hard time imagining perfection, like what that would actually mean.
Yeah. I mean, I think the true meaning of happiness comes from solving problems, right? And we're constantly upgrading our problems.
Yeah.
And that's also very influenced by the subtle art of giving a fuck, or not giving a fuck.
Yeah.
But you're like, right, if you're homeless, like your problem is finding a place to live and maybe your next meal. And let's say you upgrade to the point where you're not homeless, but then you have a steady job, but your next problem becomes, how am I going to get that like nice pair of sports equipment? I don't know. Then let's say jump 5 stages later, you're really wealthy and your problems become managing people below you, or finding a contractor to work on an addition to your house, right? It's like we're always going to have problems, but it's upgrading those problems as you go through different life, I guess, like financial situations.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. So let me ask you this question on the topic of like perfection. What in your mind does a perfect world look like?
On that note, I think a perfect world looks like immediately solving the next problem.
Like there's always an answer.
Without the struggle of solving the problem, I don't know. I guess but it wouldn't be that fulfilling at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. It is hard to grapple with. So let me ask you this question then. What are you going through life right now dealing with? It's taking up the most mental capacity for you.
Having a long-term partner.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I've been with my boyfriend for 2 years. I don't know if he'll listen to this because he doesn't really listen to most of my podcasts that I do because he doesn't listen to podcasts, period.
Sure.
But trying to decide if like it's something I will like if we're heading towards marriage or not. And I'm obviously upset about this, but it's like, do I stay or do I go? And I've been like through so many relationships where I don't just like spend like 3 or 6 or even 12 months with someone and like stop. I like to wait like 5 years and then I'm like, and then it ends, which like is a really, really time consuming.
Yeah.
And
sounds painful.
Yeah. And like, it's what's funny is that like my teacher and this, like my parents are still together after 43 years
Wow.
of marriage. And I know that because my brother's 43.
Nice.
And yeah, so I have like a great teacher and like them being together. But I do think it was like probably easier then. Like now we just have like so many options and in terms of, I guess, like online, like I've never actually like done any online dating in my life, but I think there's like this dissatisfaction when you have so many options and choices and like, is the grass always greener? And then you open your phone and you're like, oh my God, all these people are in like super happy relationships. And like, I'm just like, I'm not there.
Yeah.
So that's like, it definitely weighs on me a lot. And like the times where I've raced the best or like when I feel good in my relationship. And like, I also think about a lot where like, I forget what book it was, but like, and this like, it sounds like horrible advice, but like the whole purpose of like finding, like dating different people, the whole purpose of like dating is like to settle. And like settling is such a like negative word.
Yeah.
Often, but it's like the whole point of trying different partners is like so that you do settle and that there's actually freedom in settling because you're with a partner and you get to explore the depth of that relationship more versus just like a lot of people more broadly. Right. So I think about a lot, like, do I do I try to make this, and it shouldn't be like, it's not like it's toil and work every day for me. It's not like that, but like,
Sure.
It's figuring out if this is like, yeah, if like this is the person I want to be for the rest of my life. And then that sounds like really daunting. So
Why does it sound daunting?
I guess it's like, I'm also really afraid of divorce. I would hate that pain. Yeah. I don't know why I'm like, I shy away from why that pain is like almost preventing a conversation of discussing a long-term commitment.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that. I have some responses. I'd like to actually tell a story personally first, just in the context of what you're sharing, because so I've been married for 7 years now, 7 years in June. And all growing up when I was dating, and I didn't date that many people. I dated maybe 3 or 4 girls, like actually seriously, like, oh, maybe I should, where I had enough brain cells upstairs to think about what marriage could actually mean. And then when I got married, as I've gone through marriage now after 7 years, I've had the opportunity to see a lot of cyclical patterns, which in our own individual lives, I mean, you notice the patterns that you have, maybe the seasons throughout the year of maybe you're reminded of some hard thing that happened, and like you kind of have these ups and downs. And it's very similar for me, at least in marriage, where we've had some really awesome times. And actually the first year of our marriage was actually the hardest that we've ever had because she was super depressed. I wasn't emotionally intelligent enough to know how to be supportive. She was making all the money. I was doing this entrepreneur thing where she was like, she was working night shift, being a nurse, taking care of everything. And so the first year was terrible. Like she was even feeling suicidal. And then, the next few years we started going to counseling together and separately. And we kind of came to this place where, when we first walked into this counseling appointment, it was like, what is your commitment level? Ashley was like at a 3 out of 10. And I was at like a 5. And the guy even told us, if you were doing any premarital counseling with me right now, I would tell you guys not to get married, which probably isn't the best thing to tell a struggling couple, to be honest. But we went through it and we talked to a few others, and we came to a place where like her commitment was actually even higher than mine. And we got like to the 8, 9, and 10 range. And we've gone up and down. And for me, it actually reminded me of this movie that I saw when I was much younger called The Age of Adeline. Have you seen that movie? It's an old movie.
No, I'm going to write it down.
So it's basically the story of this woman who, and her, there's this young woman, young man, they fall in love, they're together. But what the man doesn't know is that the girl, she's immortal and he's going to age. And she like leaves him, right? And she leaves him and he's like wondering what happened. It's like World War II or something. Anyway, he gets married 40, 50 years later. He's married now 40 years and he sees this girl who he was with when he was really young. And he's like, you remind me of this woman who I was married, or not married to, but this woman I was dating when I was much younger. And I loved terribly. Like, long story short, he ends up figuring out the story. And he still has a place in his heart for her. But what's really interesting with the story is his wife of 40 years finds out like a little bit of that he had a thing for this woman. And she's like really questioning their marriage because he obviously still has some level of attachment to this one. And he looks at her standing in the doorway as he says goodbye to this girl, Adeline, who is immortal, whatever. She goes away for the final time. And the wife is like concerned, like shaken. And he looks at her in the doorway as she's walking, this other woman's walking away. And he's like, 40 years, babe. Like we've been through it. And I was just totally reminded, that made sense for me so many years later when I was married, because I realized that beauty for me as a man, the beauty of a woman is obviously something that I will always I think cherish too much. But I've realized that the person who I'm now standing across from, that we've been married for 7 years, as we start to get into our 30s and go to our 40s or 50s, that beauty is fleeting, but it's making it through those hard times together that I think really is something that is for me comforting when I go to sleep at night, or whenever I screw up and do something stupid that damages a relationship. I remember why she loves me, and like it just kind of builds upon that. And I think, this is me being a little countercultural here, but I think that one of the like dangers or the hard thing about like being on all levels intimate with a person before you're married to them can make it difficult, because then when you get to that place where you're like, oh, can we spend the rest of our lives together? It kind of, and this is going to sound really anti-cultural, but it kind of takes the carrot away from what you're motivated to get, because I think that especially on like a physically intimate level, like that is supposed to be the thing that binds you together forever chemically. And then you work on the stuff that actually matters, which is like the day-to-day talking back and forth, and going through the hard stuff. So anyway, I don't know where I'm going with that, except to say that with the commitment thing, from what I've learned, and I'm obviously a dude, so it's different, but it's like, there's always going to be grass greener, because I live in the Instagram world that you live in. Obviously, now what I do with the podcast, and I have to be open with my wife about some of those like temptations or things that I see, because even my wife's had that, where we've shared with each other, hey, like I'm attracted to this other person, and I don't want to like harbor those feelings or hide them, because I think they can grow in the dark. And she shared the same thing back and forth. And as we've grown through those moments together, it's let us both kind of have a breath of relief in knowing that we're committed to each other. We're still human. We're still going to have those thoughts of, is the grass greener? But I think verbalizing those things with our partners and talking with them and being like, yeah, like this is a real thing I'm feeling, allows it to kind of pour water on the fire, rather than, you try to keep that fire over here and then it burns out of control and then you're in trouble. So,
I like that analogy a lot. And like, I'm at the age where like my I guess like my identity is like fully developed too, which is like, I think that was like 35 roughly, like that happens. And my partner is 47, so he's been fully developed for a while. So there's like no changing that. And like, this is my first relationship where I've been fully developed, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about like whoever I choose, I'm going to have, it's like, you're choosing someone for those two, I think it was a phrase, it was like Tuesday night dinner conversation, like just like another weekday night where like, there might be not much to say.
Yeah.
But you can find like peace in that, and that like the whole like I'm old enough to know that like the initial honeymoon stage like is completely fleeting. Yeah. And that I do want someone for like when I'm post triathlon, even like post like being at my post being at my fastest, and those boring Tuesday night dinners, and so it's like I'm realistic about what a relationship looks like for the rest of my life, and I see it in my parents. But we're not human if we're not like going to be attracted to whoever it is.
Yeah.
Which is James Franco for me.
Yeah. At least you know who it is. Yeah, it's interesting that you share that too about the like the boring Tuesday night dinners and things like that. Because one of the first lessons that I had to learn actually the hard way, because I refused to do this for my wife, is like she was wanting me to sit down one evening with her and just literally sit beside her while she looked for other jobs online. And I'm such a task-oriented person and focused on efficiency that I'm like, well, how is me sitting beside you going to help you? And because I didn't understand it, I wrote it off completely for years. And like, that's something that I've learned that like is such a huge grounding thing for her, is just being in the presence of her, of whatever it is about my presence. It's really comes from her dad, because her dad is such a calm, stoic rock in their family, which it's funny because I'm really not that way. I'm learning to try to be that way. Like I'm like this, I don't know, slippery boulder. But anyway, she really does find a lot of grounding in that being still and in the moment. And I think that's stuff that honestly should be talked about more, because life, there's a lot of glamour in like the new relationship phase. And I think that's, infatuation has its place. Like it's important because it drives you to want to get to know that person on every aspect and every level as you can. But then as that kind of wears off, it matures, and it's like, those I don't know, the old fires, even though they may not have the tallest flames, they have the hottest coals, and like they just kind of keep you warm for the longest time. So, yeah.
Yeah, it makes me think of The Notebook, like when like they're old and the wife has Alzheimer's, and then like they dance together, and like when I see that, or if I see it in real life, if I see an old couple holding hands, like I just lose it. I just like cry.
Yeah. Yeah.
I started laughing before you even finished your sentence before about your wife's dad being calm and stoic, because I had the opposite. My dad is 100% Italian, very emotional, like very quick to get angry, but also very quick to cry. And like, even when my parents visit me here and they leave, like he starts crying, and I'm like,
oh.
And now I'm at the point where I have parents in their mid to late 60s, and my time with them is finite, and like I also get upset.
Yeah. No, I totally understand that. It reminds me of. Oh, go for it.
Oh yeah, and it just makes me think of the conversation with Rachel Olsen, where she was talking about her mom and like seeing her parents together, and seeing how they show up for each other now, and how it's very different from when she was growing up.
Yeah. Yeah, it also reminds me of the conversation I had with Luke McKenzie about, because his parents are on the eve of their lives, and watching him get emotional just thinking about the kind of dad that he had. Yeah, I'm not quite to that level yet, because I'm 30. I'll be 32 actually on the 9th, but my mom had me when she was like 19 or 20, so we're relatively close in age. But I'm seeing some of my friends go through that, and like, yeah, that's hard. It's so interesting, these seasons of life, because yesterday, I was at the lake house, which isn't my lake house. It's like my in-laws' lake house, but they share it amongst my in-laws. So my in-laws and then their siblings. And recently, how we can call the patriarch of the family, like he died in a tragic accident a couple years ago. So all of the estate and all of this land and houses and stuff's moving on. And as they're going through this, they're talking about executors of estates and how they're going to pass it to us, because they want to be more prepared than the last generation was. And I'm sitting here, and they're like, it's not, at one level, it's like they want us to be excited because eventually we will get passed on down all of this stuff. But I'm like, I'm going to be like, I mean, I'm 32. Like, if I'm 60, then like all this is just like passing down stuff. I don't know. It sounds cool in the moment, and it's great that I can enjoy it right now, but I don't know. It's just, it kind of hit me in the head in a different way this week, because I realized like I'm getting older, and they're getting older, and I'm going to have kids, and we're going to have to do this. And it's just like, on one level, it's like, oh, this is so cool. But on another level, it's like, wow, this is all really meaningless. Like, we live to go to work, to buy land, to say we had it, and then we die, could care less about it because we're dead. And then we pass it on to somebody else. And yeah, more money, more problems, I guess. But yeah, it really kind of hit me between the eyes how fast time flies yesterday.
Yeah, I have the opposite problem where like my parents still have a mortgage, and the mortgage is like a little bit, it's like, I don't know, 5 years left, but it's the same amount left as it was when they started 25 years ago.
Wow.
Because my parents don't make great financial decisions. And when I was younger, like, and this is what also drives me a lot in triathlon, it'll make sense in a minute, but my parents filed bankruptcy, and so the house that I grew up in, we had to let go of. And it's also the reason where I recently mentioned this in a Instagram post about how I bought my own car recently, Prius. And that was like a huge deal for me, because I grew up with my parents driving like really crappy cars because they couldn't get a car payment because they didn't have any credit.
Yeah.
And one of the things that, probably the second thing on my mind lately is like being able to afford a house. And with the price of houses now, it actually makes more sense to rent. But what drives me a lot is the fact that my parents, like, so when we were going through renting houses and buying crappy cars and having to move out of my childhood home and answering calls to collectors, I was trained how to answer the phone. If somebody called and asked for my parents, and I'd have to say that my dad's at work and my mom's in the shower, which sometimes was true, but my parents picked up a lot of extra shifts, and I mentioned this on our last podcast, but I didn't go into why. And the concept though is if you need more money, you just work more and you do what you got to do to pay the bills. So, and this is of course like post bankruptcy and trying to rebuild credit, but like one thing that is not necessarily true, but it's like my inherent truth is like, if you want something, you have to work more or you have to work harder. Like there's no way around it. And so, I mean, we'll see, I may inherit debt. I'm not sure. Hopefully not, but it's like, I try not to be resentful of people who were lucky enough to have their parents had a second home and sold it. So they had a down payment for their next house. Mm-hmm. But yeah, sorry, my point was that like triathlon only to an extent, if you want to, and endurance sport in general, if you want to do better, just put in more volume, put in more time, or get smarter about how you're working. Again, to an extent, don't get a stress fracture.
Yeah.
But
yeah,
that's like, that's something that is going to sit with me forever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, again, I was thinking about that actually just on my run recently about how to train smarter and harder, but you're talking about the finance stuff, and I recently realized too, because I grew up where my dad, he went to college when I think he was like 33 or something, 30. He decided, I'm going to go be a nurse so he could, make a little bit more money, because we grew up, we had a house over our head. We didn't grow up in like extreme poverty, but we were definitely poor where, it's like, we're never going out to eat. We had to beater cars, counting everything. We get the same few things at the grocery and kind of survive on the cheapest things that we can, which as a kid, like I didn't think a ton about it. I mean, I did have a few friends who were wealthier and, the way that they spent money, it just didn't make sense in my mind. I actually had this like inferiority or complex, but not, I guess, I don't know how you would actually call it, but I felt when I was around them that they felt like they were better than me, even though that totally wasn't the case. So then getting older, as I did decide, especially after my dad passed away, for whatever reason, like I decided I was going to figure out life on my own. And it was like this extreme independence and into the foray of how do I survive life, but how do I thrive? And, I was obsessed with business and trying different things and made tons of mistakes. But I started to make friends where I realized like, oh my goodness, like there really are ways to work smarter and not harder, because I worked on construction crews where I would be working with a guy who would all day long, we were putting on button caps, which is like to put on this like plastic wrap for houses. And like this guy would come to work every day with a 2-liter of Mountain Dew, eat a chocolate muffin for lunch, had no teeth. And he believed that the world was out to get him. And like, this is the only way that you could do it. And they would tell me like, oh, now you're here on this crew, you're going to be here forever. And I'm glad they said that, because it actually pushed me to go and want to figure something else out. And there's nothing against hard work. Like I actually love construction. I love framing homes. But what I realized was like, yeah, if you try a bunch of different things, like I believe everybody with their personality and character traits has inherent talents that if you lean into, you can use those to your advantage to work in a smarter way to add value to society, and it'll pay you. Because one of the greatest piece of advice I ever got from someone was one of my ex-girlfriend's dads. He owned a construction company that I was working for, and he gave me a job. And he said, if you work hard and you work well, you'll never have to go look for work. Work will always find you. And I really took that to heart because I looked up to him a lot. My dad had passed away. I thought I was going to marry this girl and this was going to be my father-in-law. So all of the scenarios played to where like his words really weighed heavy on me. And it was when I was going through a time in my life when I was absolutely bat crazy. Like we can go into that sometime, but it's crazy. But he really impressed upon me like that was true. And I was like, yeah, like there are ways to work smarter. Like, but then I was on this chase for many years of like, what am I good at? What does that really mean? And really what I found out, it's less about quote unquote what I'm good at, but what I enjoy. And I think what we enjoy, we end up being good at because we're willing to invest the time. So yeah, you can definitely be smarter than harder. I've met people who make so much money for doing what I would consider not much work, but they did invest a lot of time into figuring out how to do that. So yeah, it's crazy.
I was thinking about that on my 11 a.m. run today.
Yeah.
I told myself, get this run done. You don't even have to wake up that early. Like, get up at 8:30 and get running by 9 and finish at 10 and then, or 10:05, and then you have a 10:30 meeting. And even just giving that example, of course, a 65-minute run takes longer than 65 minutes.
Yeah.
But I was like, you just have to be at your first meeting at 10:30. It's not that hard. And then, I don't know, I was like sleeping really well. And I was like, I'm just going to get the sleep. I must need it. And I'm so privileged to be able to do that. But I was thinking as I was like shuffling my day around at work, I was like, how am I getting this run in before? I was like, I can't move the later part of my day around, but let me make some room in the morning. And as I was on, and I moved one thing and it's fine. And I got my run done at 11. And I was thinking how when I first started my job, every meeting I was invited to, I went to and I prepared for and I followed up on. Like, I was doing the most. But I was at a lot of meetings and I'm like, I haven't said a single word. I'm getting no value out of this and I'm putting no value into this meeting. And so I'm at the point now where I've worked at Citibank for 6 years.
Yeah.
Sorry, 7? Yeah, something like that. And I'm like, I know where I'm needed and I know where I'm not needed. And part of working smarter is like, don't attend everything. Like, you're not going to get value out of it. And if you're not giving value to it, don't go.
Yeah.
And that's what frees up my days so that I actually get work done. Otherwise, I can be in meetings for 6 hours a day if I want to, but have like a certain seniority and realization that I don't need to go to everything that I'm invited to. So
Yeah.
that's like one very micro example in a corporate environment
Sure.
where that plays out.
Yeah. Are you still enjoying your work?
I enjoy it enough where I'm happy to do it. I'm happy enough to do it. I don't get all my satisfaction out of work. And I actually see like nothing wrong with not being super hungry to climb the corporate ladder, because I like how I contribute to work. And that's for people who don't know me. For some reason, if this is their first time listening to a podcast with me, I'm a product manager at Citibank, and which basically means I decide what should be developed for the website and apps. I lead that through a design team, hand that off to a development team, and assess the impact of something after digital. Usually it's a digital feature after it's been released. And there's a way to, like, I could be churning out, hundreds of features a month or whatever, but what makes a lot more sense is to just choose 5 really good ones and be able to actually look back and assess the impact of it. And a lot of people don't do the look back. They just release and keep moving. But anyway, I like it. I get obviously more satisfaction out of triathlon. And I think there's nothing wrong with being happy in my role and not like super hungry to manage 10 people and all that. So I guess there's nothing wrong with coasting for a bit if it brings satisfaction, and climbing the ladder for the sake of climbing the ladder, I think is extremely overrated.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
I'm happy with my salary. Just being content with that. Some people get a lot of satisfaction out of their work, and that's awesome because we spend a lot of time, however many hours a day at a computer. But then I think that perspective will change when I am not doing triathlon so seriously. But for now, I get way more satisfaction out of athletics.
Yeah. Athletics, I feel like without it, I can't imagine doing, because I'm not a professional athlete, so there's obviously a distinction to be made. But I can't imagine living a life without the level of aspiration or athletic aspiration that I have now. Because before life, I don't know, it's just because the other day on Saturday, I was playing Monopoly till like 11:30 at night with my wife, and I went to get up. I went to get up, and somehow, like, I don't know what happened, but my back was like, hello, goodbye. You are done for the next 48 hours. And I had to hobble around the house. It looked like my back was completely bent over because that's the only position I could like hold for a minute that it wouldn't hurt. I was out all Sunday, out part of Monday, and today I was able to go for an easy jog, and like it's okay. Like it's just a little bit sore. So I don't even know what happened there. But where was I going with this?
Athletic aspiration.
Oh yeah, athletic aspiration. And then I couldn't work out obviously for like 3 days, which I usually take one day off a week anyway, but for 3 days straight I was like questioning everything. I was like, what am I doing? Like why can't I go exercise? I think I feel sick from not exercising. Like I'm such a dramatic person when I get sick or I'm injured anyway, so it's completely over the top. But I realized like I don't think I can do a life without this getting my heart rate up, getting my blood pumping. It just becomes such a necessity for life. And it brings a lot of fulfillment, like to see that we can still do those things, which, you know, it's interesting. It'll be interesting for me to see as I do get older. And like you were saying, you know, when you get past your fastest point, like, will I still keep doing it? Are my motivations true for the reason what I'm doing? Am I going to continue to do this and just enjoy it for the sake that it's making me, you know, feel good, which I think is mostly true. I think it'll be hard to lose athletic ability, but yeah, it's interesting to think about a life without it, because so many people say like, oh, I could never. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to about doing Ironman stuff, and I'm sure you had the same conversations. Oh, I could never. Oh, my knees are exploded. Oh, you know, whatever. There's the same reasons, but once you do these hard things, like it really does make a difference, I think, in how we view life, how you enjoy life.
Yeah. And obviously just brings way more gratitude to yourself when you aren't able to do that thing for a day or a week or a month.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I think in a couple of things I want to say, but having my season shifted so significantly this year, from planning on racing from April to October, now to like July through December or something, and not running for 5 weeks, which I think is close to almost the longest time I've not run and ever in my life since I started running. And I like think about like, oh, and like people a lot of times like look back and they're like, oh, you know, I was happy I had this setback because it allowed me to have a greater comeback, blah, blah, blah. But I think about the stupid stingray in April, and
yeah,
I'm not grateful at all for it. I still think I'm still like a little resentful about that little sucker.
Yeah.
And like, I feel like I'm still like, I am like almost back to what I was like right before the incident happened. Of course, I'm more grateful for my working body now. And like on my tempo this morning, I was like, I'm doing this. Like, this is awesome. Like my hips working, my Achilles is working, like everything's working, but man, I still wish it didn't happen.
Yeah. No, 100%. Yeah. I remember when you got that. Forgive me for actually forgetting about the stingray for a second, but yeah, that was crazy. Like you had, what all happened? Because you got stung, it messed up your foot, you couldn't race, and then it wouldn't get better. Didn't you have like a small surgery or something?
So I couldn't race. It got better within a week. And then right as a week, like day number 7 hit, it started to get bigger. My ankle was swelling up again because it got infected. Or the infection finally manifested a full week later.
Ugh.
So that is when I went to the ER, because I went to urgent care, who told me to go to the ER. My first hospital visit since I was born. I've literally never been admitted to a hospital. And
oh, wow.
yeah. I'm very risk averse, very
Yeah,
like
good for
careful, I guess. But and I had intravenous antibiotics to get my swelling down, and that in itself, plus the stingray venom or something, just killed a lot of tissue in my Achilles. So I came out of it with like basically instantaneous Achilles tendonitis and peroneal tendonitis. So
Ugh.
that's why I did not run for 5 weeks. And then for the next 3 or 4 weeks, I was strictly on the Altergy or on the lever system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ouchie, ouchie, ouchie. Yeah.
So silly.
But now you're back. You said even hip. So were you having hip problems because of that? Or
I've had hip problems since I started steeplechase in college.
Oh, yeah. Is it like labral tear issue?
It's like I think it's a mostly asymptomatic labral tear, but every once in a while I'll feel it. And then like my whole leg stops working and I have to stop and stretch. It's really annoying. But at this point, I'm not going to get surgery. So
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, usually surgery, I've heard, can actually do the opposite. Well, not the opposite. I have seen some people come out of it well, but it doesn't have a perfect success rate by any means.
Right. It's not guaranteed. And if you can get it, if you can manage it, then might as well manage it. But quick question. I meant to ask this before, and it's when you said like when you're going to friends' houses, they were clearly like nicer houses than yours, or what was like your signal that what you considered a sign of not even wealth, but something that your friends had that you didn't have?
A signal? It's interesting. I don't know if this is exactly what you're asking, but I'll kind of share what's on my mind that it prompted. So I had a bunch of different types of friends. And I think I'll preface this again with growing up in the religious context that I did. One thing I think that is good about our church, the Adventist church, is like there's a lot of intermingling from different social classes, and a lot of sharing goes on. So like my mom's best friend grew up in a family that owned a lumber company, and like they're all multimillionaires, and we grew up going to the beach with them every once in a while where they'd bring us, and it always made me feel uncomfortable, but they were really nice. And like, so there was that kind of a friend. And then there was other friends who I had where I grew up with them for years, and then for whatever context, I didn't like spend time with their family, but then one time I did, and I was like, oh my goodness, these people are massively wealthy, not because of how they carried themselves, because you can tell some people are wealthy based on how they carry themselves. Some people are not wealthy based on how they carry themselves, and they act wealthy. So there's a lot of different pieces to the puzzle. But with this one guy, like he wore holy shoes. He wore like kind of just like, I don't know, everyday clothes. He drove a beater car even till we were like 16, 17, 18. And I had no idea. And then when I found out that his family was probably the most wealthy family I'd ever met, like I really respected him for that, because he did. It's not like he was trying to hide it necessarily, but he just did not care. He didn't go into the family business. He wanted to do something totally different. So I had a lot of different examples of how to live, see like how you can live a life and present yourself. But what was a telltale sign to me usually of the kind of person that I looked up to when it came to wealth was they didn't necessarily have to wear trashy clothes. They kind of wore whatever, they wanted. It wasn't the super high society bourgeois walk with a certain, whatever. But it was how they just conversated with other people. Because I could tell with some of my friends, if someone from a lower society class that didn't fit in necessarily socially, they would kind of outcast them without outcasting them, or as soon as they would go away, they kind of make fun of them or whatever. But if somebody had money who wasn't even like that socially good of a person, they would kind of accept them in. So I was like, I don't want to be associated with those types of people. And I thought about this a lot more after I was like 20, 21, because before then I really didn't. I mean, I thought about it, but I didn't make any actions upon it where I was like, oh, I should change my friend group or really figure out who I invest my time with most. What about you though? What were you thinking?
I was thinking much more material things. And I think about this every time I use my sink, but we have like a separate sprayer, and that's like,
that comes off the handle, like where you can, yeah.
To me, like I didn't have that growing up, and so to me, that's a sign of wealth. As is having more than one bathroom, and because I grew up with 2 siblings and 1 bathroom, And
Yeah.
so we were always and I still notice it because I take quick showers. And because there's like, you don't know if someone else needs a bathroom. So that
Yeah.
like has not changed for me, but that's a sign of wealth, is having more than one bathroom, having
Oh,
more
wow.
than one level in your house
Oh, yeah.
is a
That was
sign of
big for
wealth.
me. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. I remember that one. Yeah.
I think I was thinking of this because like I saw it was like a meme or something, and I was like, people like were writing in the comments what they observed, what they considered a sign of wealth. So now I'll like think about things in everyday life that I'm like, oh, that's a sign of wealth
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
perhaps I have now. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest one for me now is for my own life, because we've been up and down, for my wife going through grad school and then me being an entrepreneur, like we've gone through a few months in our life where we're like, oh, we don't have to stress about money. And the other times where it's like, oh my goodness, like, are we going to survive? And for me now, it's like whenever I can go out to eat and not have to think about it, which I'm going to actually send you a video that, who was it? I think it was, what's his name? Johnny, can't think of his last name, big YouTuber he was Mormon, but anyway, he did a video on like the different classes of income and how people live their lives statistically, what they spend their money on. And, being able to not worry about the food that you're buying and just buy food based on, what you want is like, puts you in like the top tier of the world, like beyond the top 1%. And in the US, I think it's like maybe the top 10 or 15%, because a lot of people do live paycheck to paycheck. It's actually crazy how many people that do that. And I know doctors, I know actual surgeons, actually. It's just interesting. Like for me, I've observed this in my own journey. When we first got married, we were really frugal because my wife was making like $1,300 every other week. And somehow we survived off that. And now we're making significantly more than that. And I've realized that my standard of living has gone up in my mind. So it's harder to budget. And I'm like, no. Now that we're moving to California, we're going to have to be a little bit more conscious about that. But it is lower, 21% lower than the average of California. So it's a cheaper place in California. But anyway, now it's a good opportunity for me to like pull back on all of these things and kind of get back into the thing. Because I know now that my wife's a nurse practitioner and I'm, making a bit more money than I ever have. The temptation is to go out and like live a life that, what would I say, it like equals that. But I want to go underneath that. That way I'm not stressing about it, because it's crazy. Like I know people who make multiple six figures, but they are living like on the verge of not having cash all the time. And it's just wild because I don't know, it's just a human thing to do, I guess.
Yeah. I grapple with that a lot with triathlon, and I have since I started, because I'm in such a, I guess, like wealthy sport with a really high barrier to entry. And even buying my bike, my current bike in 2020 was like a big decision for me, because I would race pro for 2 years, and I was on a bike that I bought in 2013 or 14, like like it was a Cervelo, but
Yeah.
So like I grapple with that all the time, with like how expensive the sport is, and how like I didn't even go to camp growing up because camp was too expensive.
Yeah.
And like I won an American Girl doll, but didn't tell my parents because I knew how expensive it was, because I was hyper aware of what things cost.
Yeah.
I knew how much the mortgage was. My parents argued about the cable bill and the phone bill, so I knew how much that was. Like, cost is I'm so conscientious of it that I've also had to conscientiously be like, no, Nicole, like you're racing pro. You can't be on a $3,000 bike anymore. You should buy the nicer bike.
Yeah.
Or, like, don't be afraid. Now we have, I have some sponsorships, but at the time it was like, do I want to eat this gel? Like, this gel costs like $1.29. Like so aware of what things cost. And now I could see it when my parents visit, and my dad's like, oh, I was going to buy these, like, they love to buy like those like grocery store, like crumb cakes and a package of cookies. And he'd be like, this like other one was on like, it was like $8. And I'm not spending $8 on a like crumb cake. So I got this one for like $5. I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But like like it'll come up in like conversation with strangers and he'll mention the cost of something.
Yeah.
But with my financial salary, I'm like, okay, no, like I shouldn't think like, and you mentioned that thing about buying food at the grocery store. I know exactly how much something costs at the Hannaford versus the Market Basket. And I look at the flyers. I still look at the circular and I'm like, oh, like what's on sale at Market Basket? Oh, let me go get those things. And I can tell you right now that Ben and Jerry's is on sale at Hannaford for $3. So I know I'm going to go this week. I'm going to get Ben and Jerry's, and then at Market Basket, I'll get mostly everything else. But it's like
goodness.
that stuff runs really deep.
Yeah.
And that actually the grocery store is the one thing where I get excited to spend money though, because I have to, right? I have to buy food. So
yeah,
I will get, the things that are on sale, but I'll obviously buy all the other things that I need. And I'm not living off of rice and beans. So like I will buy my meat from the farmer's market. And cause I have really strong beliefs about knowing where your meat comes from and all that. But
yeah, sure.
It's like very much both ends of the spectrum. And I'll spend the money, but I'm hyper aware of what I'm spending it on.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so let me ask you this question then. What do you do? So with these kinds of habits, I mean, it's amazing how deep these things run into who we are, because you grow up throughout adolescence. Essentially, we're like large language models ourselves. We're being trained on our parents' data for years and years and years. And then, when we have an input, we usually send out a specific type of an output. So, which for being frugal, I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing ever. I think that's something you can hopefully pass down, like a moderated version to, if you have kids or something, or to family members to kind of help them. But I know for me, a lot of those habits that I took on from my parents, that I did notice even watching them, like, oh, I'll never do that. And then like it becoming a part of who I am, trying to combat and change the way that I think or operate around those certain parameters, whatever they may be. What do you do to combat, or what are you doing to combat like some of those more toxic or not helpful or healthy habits that you've retained from your parents?
One thing is reminding myself that I have all of my needs met, right? I'm not struggling to pay my rent every month. And the reminder that you can't take these things with you when you die. There's a lot of things that you could save the good champagne for a special occasion, or save like right now I have running shoes that it took me a while to take them out of the box. I'm like, don't save your running shoe. Like the foam's going to die anyway if you leave them on a shelf. Like use them now, enjoy it now.
Yeah.
So that's sort of an adage that I remind myself of to combat the tendencies to save and not spend.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I have a question for you. You mentioned going out to eat. When you were younger, what was your celebratory dinner place that you thought was fancy, but looking back, it wasn't fancy?
Olive Garden. Yeah. Which, to be fair, Olive Garden has totally changed over the years. I feel like it used to be higher quality, and then it got bought out by whatever that big corporate company is, and its quality, in my opinion, has gone down. But yeah, it was always Olive Garden. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like when my mom said we're going to Olive Garden, it was like, yeah, that was a big deal.
Yeah. Olive Garden also, and then there was an Italian restaurant, privately owned by us. And I remember they had a meal deal. They had 4 different meal deals. And one of them that we always got was 2 pizzas, a 2-liter bottle of soda, and a quart of French vanilla ice cream. And it was $20.
Wow.
Yeah. I remember the cost of everything. So that's, and then there was another one that was 1 pizza instead of 2, but wings, and 12 dozen wings and soda and ice cream.
Yeah. It's crazy the things that we remember from our childhood. It's absolutely wild. Yeah. I was watching, I love the nostalgic things that come across Instagram, like the reels, the 90s nostalgic, because I saw this hilarious reel yesterday where a guy's basically like, oh yeah, today we're always, we're so distracted driving, and then it like cuts the video to him driving in his car, like scrolling through an old CD book, and then he's like reading the
It's like running his
MapQuest
mouth.
directions. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you see that one?
Yeah, he's like, what are we
Yeah,
going
exactly.
through?
Oh my goodness, you have a CD-ROM in it. That's so funny.
CD at the ready because I was cleaning out my old car, which still had a CD player. And
Oh, no
now
way.
that was the last place that I had that could play CDs. And now I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, I guess I have to download songs. Okay. Another thing that comes up a lot is that I don't run with music. And occasionally now I will listen to podcasts, but I never run with music. And I definitely don't do anything bike and swim. And that is because growing up, or not growing up, this is more like college time, I didn't have a cell phone until I was 18. And I didn't have a smartphone until I was 21 because they weren't around.
Yeah,
But
same.
in that same vein, I never had an iPod of any sort.
Oh, wow.
So therefore, I was never accustomed to the concept of carrying music while I ran. And to this day, I hate carrying my phone when I run. But yeah, so like even today, I have about 10 songs on my phone. And that's it. And I have to like actually download music now if I want to play it in the car. But I tend to usually just download podcasts and play that in the car.
Yeah. What do you download them from? Like, do you not use Spotify or something like that?
I do use Spotify and now iTunes.
Okay, like Apple Music.
Not iTunes, sorry. I use Apple Podcasts for most of my podcasts. I only listen to Spotify podcasts because of yours.
Oh, really? Well, it's on Apple Podcasts, so you can listen on there.
I didn't know that.
That's so funny. Yeah, it's on.
I
It's
like
on.
the video sometimes.
Yeah,
If it's someone I really like,
That's
I'll watch
true.
the video.
yeah,
Like Rachel.
that's true. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's
Allegedly.
interesting with the podcast. I've been putting them on. It goes on YouTube, and then obviously it's on Spotify and all the other podcast platforms. But the only video is YouTube and Spotify. And the reason I pushed everybody to Spotify is because that's what I've been using to distribute it. And I can read more analytics and metrics that way. And they're kind of constantly changing. It's a relatively new product because they bought Anchor. Don't know if you remember with Anchor,
Yeah.
but it was free, and like I get some perks that I wouldn't get elsewhere. But I mean, there's a lot of other options, so maybe we'll switch someday. But yeah, it's interesting the ones that we're using now.
Do you do anything as a result of your analytics? Or do anything different?
I do. I will, if I notice an episode does really well, I'll try to like analyze why I think it did well, and then I'll share more reels typically from those episodes, or try to make more reels. It's so interesting. I have 81 episodes out now, and I think it's over 2 terabytes of data. And there's so many good pieces of like reels and content, and I even think like viral videos that could be made, but I just don't have the time to like go in and search them all. So I'm experimenting with my guy who edits the podcast, who helps me produce it and stuff, using a couple AI tools to help pull out even more. Because right now I use AI to do all the show notes, all the transcripts, make the reels. It can even do some of those, but it's apparently can go into like all of your data and pull out, what topics of conversation you can write it, and then it'll pull out stuff like that. So I'm going to try that. But yeah, I don't change a whole lot though. And Spotify lags like a day or two behind on the actual analytic data. So it's not like I can make any real time decisions, but YouTube, however, I watch all of the videos, analytics pretty heavily. And it's interesting. YouTube's such a weird algorithm too, because I can change the title. I can watch the views and they'll go flat. And if I change the title, it'll pick it up again. And if it performs better, it'll shoot it even higher. But all of my videos get like, and when I say videos, I'm talking about the shorts and the reels, they get like 500 views. And then recently they started getting 1,000. So it's such an artificial thing. Cause I think sometimes I used to think about like making a viral video as like, oh, it's just such a really good video. And don't get me wrong, more people will share it outside of the algorithm sharing it if it is something that is interesting. But YouTube, Google, they have the power to make something viral if they want to make it interesting and viral, which I feel like is really artificial. Like it's so, I don't know, it's bothersome to me.
Yeah, I think about that. Like, I don't care all too much, but like about my own videos and how many views they get. But it's like, yeah, you could be a slave to the algorithm. Or if you just like accept the fact that it's kind of a crapshoot, then you can live your life a lot easier.
Yeah. So that's what I do. I try to just share it no matter what. I was listening, or I actually looked up, Joe Rogan?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. So I looked up his very first ever podcast, and it was a video, and you can go and scroll on Spotify, and it is so bad. But it's good, but it's so bad. Like, obviously, super grainy. The conversation flow wasn't that good, and now he's like over, I don't know what, going on 3,000 episodes or something. So I'm like, oh, there's so much to learn still in this whole podcasting realm.
Yeah, I asked the question about the analytics originally because I get a lot of analytics from work too to see if the feature I release, if it's performing well. And it's shocking. Like, you can kind of pick your own KPIs to understand, like, is this what I value? Is it downloads, or is it reels watched or shorts views?
Yeah.
And but a lot of times people will look at the numbers and go, and then they do nothing with it. And they're just like on to the next.
Yeah, it's interesting. The biggest episodes that have given us the most growth were like in the very beginning. I think I had on Nick Goldston, and like overnight we like tripled our number of downloads per day and amount of followers. And then the next one, it's so funny, was Eric Lagerstrom, of course. Mm-hmm. So, and when that just told me, and then Ari Clow was the next like huge one.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, I wasn't expecting that with Ari, but what that really tells me is if a podcast does particularly well, I think it's because like it's their community that we're tapping into typically whenever I share a reel and invite them to collaborate or whatever. But I realize like those people, they have created they have such a curated audience for the type of content that they create, and that community is so behind them. That's what I realized. I was like, wow, that's inspiring, because it takes many years. I mean, even Kyle Glass with Pro Tri News, it was 3 years until they really started to grow and even be able to like think about monetization. So I still got a few more years left.
Yeah. I read this. I saw this thing once that was about, I guess, engagement, and it was a relationship between engagement / views and sales. And I'm not sure like what vertical it was, like what line of business it was, but it was the concept that your top of the funnel is like all of your like Instagram views. And then from views, then they looked at comments and then compared that to other channels. I'm not saying this that eloquently, but the point is that it was like Instagram, or so basically socials, and then email marketing, like your distribution of an email, and then podcast listens. I think I'm missing maybe like website views. And your audience is biggest with Instagram, but your conversion is extremely low. Let's assume you're selling something traditional.
Yeah.
And then as you go down to podcasts, that's where the listens are the lowest, but the engagement and people who end up buying is the highest.
Yeah.
And it's almost like a perfect correlation of time spent to develop each product, right?
Yeah.
So I think about that a lot too.
Yeah. It's interesting. Long form content has such a place to continue to grow, and obviously it's been big for a while, but in the past 3 years I feel like it's grown so much, and there's so many new triathlon podcasts. Oh my goodness, I did a research the other day and I was like, crazy how many there are. But I was interested with the analytics side too, because I've decided I'm not going to try to monetize anything for like 3 years. And I mean, like, not try to sell anything. We had one sponsorship we did with Synergy where they were giving away some stuff, and that was fun. But I don't think I want to do anything, because I think there's just so much value in adding value, trying to give value for a good long time before you try to monetize something. Because in my other ventures in the past, I feel like I've tried to monetize too quick, and then not really any of those did super well. So yeah, it's interesting stuff, but yeah, cool. Well, I have to jump here in just a minute. I gotta go and swim. But yeah, thank you so much for jumping on, and obviously going super deep. I asked some pretty personal questions, and you were obliging to share, so I really appreciate that. And I think there's lots of lessons we can learn, and I hope that we can do it again and hopefully get an update.
Yeah, I'm so honored to be here twice.
Yeah. Woo! Yeah, it's awesome. Well,
Yeah.
I hope you have a good rest of your day. Hope everything goes well for you, and we'll catch you
Thanks,
next time.
Seth.
Yeah.
Thanks. Have a good swim.
Thank you again so much to Nicole for coming on the podcast again and for sharing so fearlessly, I guess, about her life and the things that she's going through. Really means a lot to me to have people come on here and share that deeply, the piece of their lives that they've got going on that maybe doesn't get a lot of daylight, but I think that it really does help us all to continue to grow and think how to live life better. So again, thank you so much to Nicole for coming on. If you made it to this point in the podcast, just want to say thank you, though. If you are listening or watching on any of the platforms, liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, reviewing, any and all of those things help to continue to grow the podcast. So I really appreciate you guys for doing that. If you also want to sign up for our newsletter at the stupidquestions.show, you can do that really soon here. Hopefully, we're going to be starting to crank out the newsletter. I haven't started it yet because I really want to do something different that truly adds some value and that isn't just going to be a regular old email clogging up an inbox. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, again, thank you guys so much for listening, and we will catch you in the next one. Peace.